The Big Ten struggled this week. UCLA barely gets by Memphis. And how about those Virginia Tech Hokies as they upset Ohio State in the horseshoe? Week 2 was tremendous. And with that being said, welcome to the S&S Show, brought to you by Touchdown Alabama Magazine, your leader in Alabama football coverage. I be yours truly, Stephen M. Smith, but I'm joined here live from the man of Birmingham, Alabama. As always, Scott Hodnett. What's going on?
What's up, Stephen? I'm doing good. How you doing today, man?
I am doing great, buddy. Well, like other games that went on in college football on last week, we had Alabama take on Florida Atlantic. I know a lot of people say it, cupcake matchup. I called it a tune-up game as Alabama continues to improve offensively and defensively, as they will have the Florida Gators coming up in the schedule on September 20th. But against Florida Atlantic, I saw some good things. Once again, Blake Sims, the confidence, he's exuding more of it. He completed 84% of his passes. Blake Sims going 11 for 13 for 214 yards. He had 3 total touchdowns, was able to move his feet well. Jacob Coker struggled a little bit to get going. We saw the arm talent, his ability to throw the ball deep. He missed a couple of receivers, but as the game went on, he started to get into a flow. He finished 15 for 24 for 202 yards and a touchdown pass to Justin Fowler. Amari Cooper, you said it last week, Scott, one of the smoothest receivers in the game. He does it once again, 13 receptions, 189 yards. He set Alabama's single-game receiving record going back to DJ Hall in 2007, what Hall did against Tennessee. But Amari Cooper tied it against Florida Atlantic last week. You talk about it was great to see Eddie Jackson back on the field. I call him the comeback kid. Eddie Jackson, 4 tackles and a forced fumble. Trey Priest, it'll take him a little bit more time to get him back acclimated defensively. It was great seeing him back on the field. Alabama's pass rush looked okay. There were some times where the Crimson Tide would miss tackles, but Kirby Smart, Nick Saban will get that worked on. Adam Griffith got some more work in there. And how about the freak at linebacker, Rashaan Evans? A huge sack in that ball game against Florida Atlantic. But what did you see, Scott, from the Crimson Tide against the Owls of this past week?
Well, yeah, you touched on a lot of good stuff there, Steven. As far as the offense goes, I thought both quarterbacks looked really good. Blake has emerged as the front runner at quarterback. It's pretty obvious he's the man right now. He's using Amari Cooper as a safety valve. It's obvious how they're doing that, and Amari Cooper is thriving in that role. He looks incredible as the go-to receiver. Other than that, I mean, like I said, Blake Sims went 11 for 13. He looks great out there. He's not really throwing the ball downfield as much, and in turn that brings us to Coker, who it looked like the game plan changed a lot when they brought Coker in there. They pushed the ball downfield a lot more with Coker. That's why his stats weren't quite as good as in his completion percentage, I think, because Blake Sims mostly did a lot of high percentage passes. He had a couple of passes that were about 10 to 20 yards that looked really good. He put a lot of good zip on it. But Blake is the man right now. He's going to get the start against Southern Miss. I think we're going to see a lot of the same kind of stuff with both quarterbacks playing a lot. And Coker, like you said, he was finding his groove. He did make a mistake at the end of the first half and didn't get us set in time to kick at least a field goal, which is good, which is fine against a team like Florida Atlantic. But if we do that against Florida, we could lose the game from it. And I think that's why Saban was on his case about it, which is fine. He'll learn. He's still young too. He might be he might have already graduated college, but he's definitely not. He's not a very experienced quarterback when it comes to big time games. And yeah, the offense looks good. I think offensive line looks great. Their pass blocking tremendously. the run blocking, I feel like it's not as much as we would like to see it yet, because I don't think we're running the ball as much as we need to. I feel like Saban and Kiffin know that we can run the ball if we want to, and I feel like we need to try to find our rhythm in the passing game right now, and that's why you're seeing the first time in forever that Alabama had two 200-yard quarterbacks. So I mean, we just have to find who is the guy. And right now, I think we have two very, very capable quarterbacks who could play and who could start if we needed them to, or if one would go down. So I think the offense was good. The running backs didn't get as much of the load in this game. I feel like they would have gotten some more load too, because remember, this game was lightning shorted by 8 minutes or something. We would have gotten at least another drive or two out of there, and I think we would have seen a lot more of not necessarily Yeldon and Henry, but I think you've seen a lot more of Tyron Jones, who looked good, and some more Tenpenny, and maybe some more Drake in there. When it comes to defense, like you said, I think one thing that's interesting that you said was we're missing some more tackles than normal right now, and I think that has something to do with it being early on in the season. I think that's something that will get worked out, because usually Alabama's a very good tackling team, and we've missed a few tackles here, which is uncharacteristic. But Landon Collins is the leading tackle on the team, and he looks fantastic. He's in midseason form already. Eddie Jackson coming back was a gigantic shot in the arm. He reminds me of when Dre Kirkpatrick would play. He's a lot more comfortable in his second year. You can tell that he just kind of goes for the ball a little more than trying to not make a mistake like he did last year. He can play into more of his headhunter kind of mentality. You can tell that's the way he wants to play, and I love it. And he looks great at that corner over there. He already looks like he's in midseason form too. I think that was a really big key, having him back. Cyrus Jones looks good again. So right now it looks like we have two corners that are good to go. As far as linebackers go, I think linebackers are is kind of the weakest part of the defense right now. And I'm not saying they're a weakness necessarily, but I think they're the weakest part of the defense right now, which is very unlike an Alabama team. You got to look at it. They're really young in that linebacking core besides Trey DePriest. And Reuben Foster and Reggie Ragland are both playing fantastic right now. Reggie Ragland is playing like a all-star right now, all-SEC kind of linebacker in his second year. And he looks great. As far as a pass rush goes, yeah, it's not exactly what we thought it would be so far, but also we're playing Florida Atlantic, we're playing West Virginia. We're not playing these guys are not necessarily in it to, you have to make this sack to win the game right now, and when they are, and when that flip switches, you never know what you're going to see. I think these guys are more than capable of doing that. Rashaan Evans got his first sack. He's going to be an immediate impact player. We said it in the offseason. We said it went on signing day, to be honest, that he was a gigantic get for Alabama. He reminds me of C.J. Mosley, but with more explosiveness. And I think that is a deadly combination for opposing teams. I love what I'm seeing out of Rashaan Evans, and I think he's just going to get even better and better and get more and more playing time. He's too good to keep off the field. We saw a lot of Deshaun Hand, too. He didn't get a sack. He didn't do much stuff, but I was paying attention to, and he looks good. His form's good. He's a big kid. He'll get it. I like what I'm seeing out of him. So as far as the defense goes, yeah, I like it. I don't think we really have much to worry about coming off the Florida Atlantic game and going into Southern Miss. But and special teams, kickoff covers look good. Didn't really see much J.K. Scott. He looked pretty good though when he was out there. And Adam Griffith is banging him right down the middle, man. He looks great. He looks like one of the best kickers in the country right now.
I agree with you on the defensive aspect, Scott. I mean, like you said, it's the first week of the season. You're going to have some missed tackles. I know it's uncharacteristic of Alabama, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, because they pride themselves on having defensive backs that can break down in space and make the tackle. They pride themselves on having linebackers that can break down in space to make the tackle. But as you mentioned, it's early in the season. These guys will improve as the season goes on. And like you said, Rashaan Evans, once he really gets a stranglehold on that playbook, he is going to be a force to be reckoned with. I saw a lot of him against Florida Atlantic. Just the pure speed coming off that edge is just remarkable. If he continues to learn from Reggie Ragland, from Denzel DeBall, and Trey DePriest on just how to wrap up opposing players and bring them down, he is going to be a force to be reckoned with. I loved what I saw from Cyrus Jones, the physicality. Can he continue just to play the ball better? Will be a question, because there were some times against Florida Atlantic where he kind of had his head turned away from the ball. He's going to have to continue to play the ball better. Landon Collins, we know what he does and what he brings to the table. Didn't see a lot from J.K. Scott, but once again, it's Florida Atlantic, and we'll know more about Alabama, as this game continues. Well, as we look at the football world as a whole, Scott, last week was the week for the Big Ten to really step up. It was the week for the Big Ten to really step up, and the conference failed. The conference laid an egg. You talk about it was Notre Dame and Michigan. You had Michigan State carrying the conference flag to Austin Stadium to play Oregon in Eugene. You had Nebraska versus McNeese State, and you had Virginia Tech versus Ohio State. And you thought that the conference, the Big Ten, would step up and would prove that it's just as good as the Pac-12, it's just as good as the ACC, and it's just as good as the Southeastern Conference. And the Big Ten laid an egg. The Big Ten laid an egg. In the final meeting of the Notre Dame-Michigan rivalry, the Wolverines get blanked. Urban Meyer never loses in the Big House. He never loses in Columbus. Ohio State lost to Virginia Tech, a rebuilding Virginia Tech. And if it wasn't for Amir Abdullah for Nebraska, the conference loses every game. So what's the issue with the Big Ten right now?
Man, it was one of the worst days in Big Ten football history probably on Saturday. It was a nightmare for the entire conference, and I don't really know what to tell you. I don't know how they can get that fixed. I really don't, because the Big Ten it's just been subpar for years now. I mean, Michigan State was a very good football team. I still think Michigan State's probably the best team in the Big Ten right now. I mean, they had Oregon on their heels, man. They had that game won, and then Oregon turned it on and did what Oregon does. And I don't know, Michigan State must have ran out of gas or something, but Oregon is very, very hard to beat at home, and Michigan State was standing toe-to-toe with them, and they were beating them. I mean, they were beating them by 9 points. And so as far as that goes, I think Michigan State's still the best team in the Big Ten. Wisconsin's up there, I think, but they did the same thing the week before, and they blew it against LSU. A rebuilding LSU team, too, is very, very young. As far as Ohio State goes, I mean, everybody talks about when Braxton Miller went down, Ohio State was doomed. I think they were doomed with Braxton Miller. Watching that offensive line play, man. Virginia Tech ate them alive. In the fourth quarter, they had 6 sacks alone. I mean, that's unbelievable. And we remember Virginia Tech last year when they played Alabama. Their defensive line ate our offensive line up. So that's the best part of their entire team probably, and they made Ohio State, you know what. So it was Ohio State losing at home. They should, I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, they'll bounce back. They'll probably still end up winning 9-10 games because they play in such a weak conference. But that conference is wide open right now. Oh, you said Nebraska. I thought Nebraska looked great against Florida Atlantic. I mean, yeah, that's Florida Atlantic. They got almost 800 yards. And then McNeese State stood up there. McNeese State had that game won. I mean, Homewood's own Amir Abdullah bailed him out with a Heisman run, if you can have a Heisman-type run against an FCS opponent. But, I mean, it was a fantastic play by him. I ended up watching a lot of that game. It was a good game. I was pulling for McNeese State to pull the upset. But you got
Hold on. Scott Hodnett has just said it here on the S&S show. He was pulling for McNeese State.
Oh, all the way, man. I was rooting for him, dude. I was hoping they could do it. I didn't even mention Notre Dame and Michigan. Michigan getting shut out for the first time in my lifetime since 1984. That's the first time they've been shut out, which is an incredible stat. And Brady Hoke's gone after this year. He could be gone mid-season. I don't know who Michigan needs to go after, but I'm just glad it's not us right now. or anybody in the Big Ten. So I don't know, man. The Big Ten's a strange deal right now. It's not good. They need a team to step up and start winning. And if Wisconsin or Michigan State doesn't run the table the rest of the way, they're not going to get a team in the playoff.
We don't know where the Big Ten is going, Scott, but we definitely know where we're going. We're going to take a quick break here on the S&S show. But when we get back, we'll recap more of Week 2 in college football and get into the preview of Alabama Southern Miss. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to the S&S show, brought to you by Touchdown Alabama magazine. And now, we're going to have a word from our sponsors. Welcome back live into the S&S show. Scott Hodnett and I just touching on, or recapping, as I should say, Alabama versus Florida Atlantic. The Crimson Tide taking that game 41-0. Mother Nature intervened with 8 minutes to go in the game, but I feel like even if Mother Nature did not intervene, Alabama would still put up another touchdown on that scoreboard. We also kind of touched on the Big Ten and the struggles that it had. Thank goodness for Amir Abdullah's run from Nebraska that kept at least one Big Ten school alive. But going back into kind of recapping Week 2 in college football, we know it was desert week for the Southeastern Conference. Let's talk about USC and Stanford, Scott. It's Steve Sarkisian. He's back home, Southern California. He's been there before. He and Lane Kiffin were co-offensive coordinators of USC from 2003 to 2005. Sarkisian's back in Southern California. You're taking on Stanford, a team that's known for physicality, defense, its ability to run the football under David Shaw, and let's not forget Kevin Hogan is at quarterback. USC won this game 13-10. In this defensive slugfest, what were the good things you saw from USC?
Last week I said that had the possibility to be in the game of the day, and it turned out to be the game of the week for sure. I watched that entire game, and it was a lot like an SEC game, and that's why I liked it a lot. It was very, very defensive struggle, but I mean sometimes when you're a team, you have to get kind of lucky and win the game, and I think USC got a little lucky in that one. Stanford outgained them by a lot in yardage, and Stanford just made a lot of boneheaded mistakes, a lot of big-time blunders, turning the ball over, not punching it in, not kicking the field goals when they should have, missing a couple of field goals, and they ended up losing the game. I mean, as I was watching it, I was just like, Stanford's going to mess around and blow this one, man, because I think Stanford's the better team still, honestly, and they messed around and blew it. It was a lot like the 9-6 game of the century LSU-Alabama game where you kind of go around, I mean, you kind of go afterwards, you're like, man, is Alabama really not as good as LSU? But they look better than they just lost the game. And I kind of feel like this is the same kind of feeling I get with that. But, I mean, USC did what they needed to do, and they won the game. I mean, they stepped up and they made the plays. So, I like what I see out of USC. I thought that they could contend this year, and they got past a gigantic test against Stanford. I mean, that was a huge test. Stanford on the road. I mean, that's a really, really tough place to win. And I like what I see out of USC. I think their offense is really good because they didn't do that great against Stanford, but that's one of the best defenses in the country. I think their defense is legit, and they're finally getting the depth back there at USC. And I think they could be a really dangerous team, especially if they get on a little roll here. I mean, they're still going to have to play Oregon, but anything is possible. Oregon's going to lose a game or two. They do every single year. You just don't know who it's to yet.
It's very difficult to play, let alone win, against Stanford in Palo Alto over there in Stanford, California. Another interesting matchup, Scott, is UCLA overrated or was Memphis underrated? The Memphis Tigers came to play against UCLA. Brett Hundley, he passed for over 300 yards for the Bruins, but in that second half, Memphis offense stepped up, UCLA's defense struggled, and Brett Hundley had a 17-yard interception returned on him for a touchdown by Memphis. If there was some more time left on that clock, oh baby, Memphis could have probably pulled the upset. UCLA won 42-35, but what's going through the mind of Jim Mora right now, because Memphis gave you a scare. You escaped the snare there, but what's going through the mind of Pasadena, Jim Mora, and those Bruins right now, because they were tapped to run away with this matchup, and Memphis hung in their hip pocket for a while.
Yeah, this is 2 weeks in a row that UCLA has been lucky to win the game against much lesser opponents. Virginia on the road and Memphis, and they should have blown out both of those teams. On paper at least. UCLA is absolutely the most overrated team in the country right now, I feel like. And when people were picking them in the playoff at the beginning of the season, and I never bought into UCLA, man. I don't know why. I thought they could be good. I definitely thought they were maybe the third or fourth best team in the Pac-12. And they have the talent to play and they have the talent to win the Pac-12. But I'm not sure exactly what's going through them right now. Maybe it's something to do with they have these expectations and they just think they're going to beat everybody without actually playing. But they need to step back and do something before they get in the Pac-12 play, because they have Texas this week. We just saw Texas get destroyed by BYU.
That could be a trap game. Keep an eye on Texas. That's being played in DKR over there in Austin. That could be a trap game.
It's a very much a trap game, because we've seen UCLA 2 weeks in a row play under what their talent is. They let other teams pretty much score with them at will. If it wasn't for defense getting 3 defensive touchdowns, they would have lost the game against Virginia on the road. They got outscored, their offense did. So on the road, this is a very, very dangerous game against a very talented Texas team who is not great and not where Charlie Strong wants them to be yet. But this is a very losable game for UCLA, and it's a very, very dangerous game.
Another game, Scott, that though the SEC was in Desert Week, we did see South Carolina take on East Carolina. And boy, the old ball coach Steve Spurrier has a lot of work to do. After getting trounced by Kenny Hill, Kenny Trill, Texas A&M, whatever nickname you want to give him, East Carolina gave South Carolina a fight. ECU is a tough football team. They always tend to give Virginia Tech a fight each season, and they gave South Carolina a fight last week. Dylan Thompson, I feel like it hasn't really sunk into him that he's the guy. I feel like he still thinks he's playing behind Connor Shaw. I feel like it hasn't sunk into Dylan Thomas that, whoa, I'm the guy. I'm the quarterback. I have to make plays. Dylan Thompson struggled with accuracy on short to intermediate passes against East Carolina. Now I understand Mike Davis is the running back. He's the engine that makes this team go, but at some point in time, Dylan Thompson is going to have to step up and make plays. And he struggled in the first half, got it going a little bit more as the game went on. But the old ball coach, Steve Spurrier, he's got to get that defense ready to play. First of all, J.T. Surratt has got to step up. He is a junior on that defensive line. He was one of the guys that played a lot when Jadeveon Clowney and Kelsey Corals was on that defensive line. So J.T. Surratt, as a junior, has a lot of experience. This team has got to get going, because if they continue to play the way they played against Texas A&M and against East Carolina, Georgia, of whom they played this week, Gurley and the gang is going to eat them alive.
Yeah, South Carolina has a world of trouble on their hands right now. I just have a feeling, man. If you look at their starting the beginning of their year schedule, A&M, East Carolina, Georgia, yeah, they're all at home, but that is a tough starting of season for any team. And just they're just missing something that's we've seen from South Carolina the past 3 seasons where they've gone 11-2. They just don't have the killer mentality right now, maybe because they're missing Connor Shaw. But they just don't look like the same South Carolina team as they have. And Spurrier is one of the best coaches in SEC history, and I think he's going to have to do one of his best coaching jobs for them to be a contender this year, man, the way it looks. I mean, yeah, they've lost Texas A&M, but they bounced back against East Carolina. Yeah, they didn't have a great game, and I think they won, 33-23? I mean, it was
They
a
won
pretty
by
close game.
10.
Yeah, I mean, it was a close game. East Carolina's a decent team, and East Carolina's going to play Virginia Tech this week, and you got to, I mean, keep an eye on that one too, because Virginia Tech could be real high off that Ohio State win for East Carolina. They could come back and bite Virginia Tech this week. Virginia Tech's had a lot of trouble with East Carolina in the past. But back to South Carolina. Yeah, this is a strange game. Georgia and South Carolina is usually a really good game. And Georgia, all they've been hearing for 2 weeks is how good they are. And we know how Georgia plays, man. They almost never play up to how good they really are in their ability. And this is a very, very interesting game in Columbia. South Carolina has their backs against the wall, man. They've been hearing for 2 weeks is how bad they are. So you have to just put this in consideration. I think this is going to be an extremely close game, and it could be on decided on a field goal. I really think this is going to be a very close game.
Oh, my! Decided on a field goal.
I think it very well could. Yeah, I've seen Georgia not play to their ability too many times, and I've seen South Carolina come and play much better, and they're at home. This is a do or die game for South Carolina. This is their season pretty much. If South Carolina loses this game, they're already 0-2 in the SEC, and their season's almost done. They have to have this one. So South Carolina needs to get better on defense, like you were saying. Lorenzo Ward has got to do something different. The defense that he has installed is not working right now. And it's...
Do you think Lorenzo Ward blitzes more? I mean, do you feel like he goes away from just a 4-man rush, 3-man, 4-man rush, and just goes, guys, we're doing trick blitzes? Do you think he blitzes and stunts more?
I think he's going to have to do a lot of that because, yeah, it'd be really easy for Mark Richt to just give the ball to Gurley and win the game. But, I mean, South Carolina, they know they've got to stop Todd Gurley to have a chance to win the game. So I think the game's going to lie in Hudson Mason's hands. And Hudson Mason is more of a gunslinger kind of quarterback, and they really haven't let him off the reins yet. Does Mark Richt allow him to be a gunslinger and go more wide open and more hurry up? Because we've seen South Carolina have so much trouble with that in the first 2 weeks. If he does, how will South Carolina have they gotten better at that? This is a very, very interesting game. I don't really know exactly what to think. I'm still giving the nod to Georgia, but I mean Georgia could very, very well lose this game, I think.
This is going to be a very interesting contest. I'm trying to see who would be the X factor for this football game because I'm still thinking the X factor is going to be Dylan Thompson. Dylan Thompson is going to have to come out and play ball. He's going to have to be accurate with the football. He's going to have to be able to put the ball in the right spots, really be a leader from that quarterback standpoint. As I said, we know the offense runs through Mike Davis, but if I had to pick an X factor for this football game, it's no question that my X factor would be Dylan Thompson. He's going to have to be lights out from the word go. Well, we're going to take another break. We're going to take another break here on the S&S show. When we get back, ladies and gentlemen, Alabama versus Southern Miss, the preview. And what would a preview be without a little history? What history you might add or might say? We're going to get to that on the other side of this break. You're listening to the S&S show, brought to you by Touchdown Alabama Magazine. Welcome back into the S&S show, brought to you by Touchdown Alabama Magazine, your leader in football coverage, Alabama football coverage. Scott Hodnett and I basically recapping the week 2 of college football with great matches we had from, of course, the Big Ten being put on stage to UCLA fighting back to win a game against Memphis. But this week, game 2, Bryant-Denny Stadium, another home game for Alabama, and it's the Crimson Tide versus the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. A little bit of history for you. 9 years ago, this game was played in Bryant-Denny. September 10th, 2005. Mike Shula was the head coach. Brody Croyle was the quarterback. And Tyrone Prothro, let's just say, made one of the most remarkable plays in the history of college football. The play won Prothro an ESPY. The play helped Alabama capture a 10-2 season in 2005, and the play still haunts defensive back Jasper Falk to this day. Golden State was up. Southern Miss, was leading Alabama 21-10 with 23 seconds to go in the second quarter when Brody Croyle puts up a prayer and the unbelievable happened. Jasper Falk had his head turned away from the ball. Though the ball was slightly underthrown, Prothro makes the adjustment. He catches the ball and traps it on the back of Falk's neck, rolls in with Jasper Falk into the end zone. It's a gladiator dog wrestle for the football. And for a while, the officials didn't know who to get the possession of the ball arrow to. They went back and watched the film, and they see how Prothro's hands cover 3/4 of the football. They give the possession to Alabama, and after that play, Alabama rips off 3 touchdowns. Brody Croyle tosses a 1-yard touchdown pass to fullback LaRon McClain. And after 2 Tim Castillo touchdowns, Alabama went on to win that game 30-21. But what a play by Tyrone Prothro. And as we live that play now, 9 years later, what a job by Prothro, trapping that ball on the back of Jasper Falk's neck. Scott, what were you doing when this madness was going on?
I was in a terrible mood when it was happening because we were getting dominated in the first half by Southern Miss. I remember that like it was yesterday. I knew our team was better than that. I mean, go back for a second. Southern Miss back in the day, and I know 9 years ago isn't that long, but it's still back in the day, under Jeff Bauer was always a terrifying game to play. I remember in 2000, we started the season number 3 in the country, and 3 games later, we got blanked 21-0 at home against Southern Miss. And it was, the downfall of DuBose, and the history's written after that. But in 2005, I knew that game was going to be tough. It's not going to be like it's going to be Saturday. Let's put it that way. When Southern Miss came to town, you know that you're going to get a dogfight. And we worked a nice little rivalry up with Southern Miss there in the 90s and early 2000s. And when I remember seeing that play, and my mind was blown pretty much. I was like, I can't believe he called it. And I guess Southern Miss couldn't believe he called it too, because it's like they forgot to come out of the tunnel in the second half. They just kind of gave up after that play. They were not the same team.
Jasper Falk looked discombobulated. You talk about you're wrestling with Tyrone Prothro for this ball after he traps the ball on your neck, on the back of your neck. What a play. Brody Croyle's thinking, my God, did he just do this? Did Tyrone Prothro just do this?
It's definitely one of those plays that we'll show our kids, and it'll be one of the greatest plays, like you said, in college football history, not just Alabama history. It is one of those plays that you just can't duplicate, really. Like it might never happen again. Ball just happened to be right there, and Prothro just happened to hang on to it and make it just a fantastic play, and it'll go down in history as one of the greatest ever.
Well, this week, it's Alabama, Southern Miss, Bryant-Denny Stadium. Kickoff a little bit later than usual, be at 5 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Southern Miss coming off a dreadful 1-11 season last year. They were 1-7 in Conference USA play. They returned quarterback Nick Mullins to the fold. Nick Mullins, sophomore this year, had some growing pains last season. Yes, he tossed for 1,776 yards, and 13 touchdowns, but he also threw 14 interceptions and completed just 49.3% of his passes. So a little bit of a double-edged sword, tough season last year for Nick Mullins. Southern Miss does return 3 of their big-time playmaking receivers. Marquise Triplett is one of those guys. Triplett stands at 6'4", very physical player, led the team with 35 receptions for 553 yards and 4 touchdowns. Very physical guy, can go up and snatch the ball, makes great plays in traffic. Southern Miss's defense is harsh against the ground. They can't play the ball well. Gave up a lot of passing yards, total yards against Nebraska, as you mentioned earlier. But when you're coming to Southern Miss, you can't come in tight. You got to come in there and play loose because you have nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose. You have everything to gain against Alabama. But when you're playing against the Crimson Tide, as Coach Saban always says, it's all about us. It's not about the other team, though we want to beat the other team. It's all about us and how we play as the Alabama Crimson Tide. I was at Saban's press conference on Monday, and Saban loves to get philosophical. I don't know why. But Saban loves to get philosophical from time to time. And Saban told the press, look, it's about observing the tree and not its shadow. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I took to Twitter and was like, fans, somebody give me a valid definition of what Saban's trying to say. Is Saban drinking too much coffee? Is he drinking too much Coke? I don't know what the deal is, but the definition hit me dead in the face, Scott Hodnett, as I was on Twitter. What Saban's basically saying is, it doesn't matter who's under center, it doesn't matter who we put on the field, as long as the camaraderie and the chemistry is in place. Can we have chemistry with whomever we have on the field? And I think that was what Saban was trying to initiate or portray. He was trying to say it doesn't matter who's on the field, as long as the chemistry and camaraderie is in place, Alabama will be fine. You look at this game, and it goes now to Lane Kiffin as an offensive coordinator. Alabama's 9th in the league in total offense. The Tide is averaging 579 yards per game. The Crimson Tide is converting 56% on third down. They're averaging 333 passing yards a game, 246 rush yards a game. So in this game, for Alabama, Lane Kiffin, does he have Blake Sims drive the ball more with more deep passes? Because I feel like Jacob Coker's the deep threat, and Blake Sims is more so of let's get the guys the ball in space and let them make plays. Does Lane Kiffin say to Blake Sims, drive the ball more with deep passes this week?
I think you see a lot more of that this week. I mean, I've heard a lot of people on Twitter and on other stuff say, why get away from just throwing the ball to Cooper around these little slants and these little side passes? Why get away from that if it's working? And I completely understand that. It's working against West Virginia. It's working against Florida Atlantic, and it's going to work against Southern Miss. But what happens when a team takes that away? Like when Florida would take that away, you have to go vertical more than that. And I really think that's a big question mark with Blake Sims right now. And I think he's capable of doing it. But one of the only times we've seen him throw one down the field has been an interception to O.J. Howard, another guy who's going to get more involved this week probably. Or are we just keeping him in the chamber, I guess, until we feel like letting him out when we need him, I guess. But he's been blocking really well. That's one thing I've noticed about Howard. But he has one target this year, and it ended up being an interception. Blake's only interception. So, yeah, I definitely think we're – I mean, let's face it. Southern Miss is a bad football team. They've been bad they've been honestly been off the radar since Jeff Bauer was fired, and they are not the team they once were, and I don't really know how they can get back to that. But Southern Miss is another tune-up game, like you said, and they're going to be. It's another game that we can try to get some stuff figured out because Florida is a good team. Florida is going to be better than they were last year, and that's going to be a very, very hard game. It's going to be a wake-up call to the entire team probably because they finally get to play a team that is just as talented as they are across the board, on especially on the defensive side of the ball. So I think the game plan is going to be a lot like it was against Southern Miss, and I expect Jacob Coker to have a little bit of a better game than he did against Florida Atlantic. And I think you're going to see a lot of the same, and Blake Sims is probably going to push the ball down the field a little bit more. I would agree with that, yes.
All right, when you look at this game, Alabama and Southern Miss, from a ground game standpoint, from running the football, last week it was the Alabama backs by committee. You had, of course, Kenyon Drake led all backs with 45 yards rushing. You saw a little bit from T.J. Yeldon. He had 43 yards rushing. Tyron Jones ripped off some nice runs in there. T. Tenpenny got his looks in. Alabama as a whole totaled 204 yards on the ground. We know Alabama can run the football. It's been the bread and butter of this program since Saban's gotten here in 2007. My question is, does Alabama go back to running the football against Southern Miss, preparing that aspect of the game for Florida, or are they still more concerned with, we got to pass the ball more? If you could give a percentage of running versus passing against Southern Miss, what would that percentage be?
I think because it's going to be more than likely a blowout, the numbers will be skewed. But I think if you look at the first half, I think it's going to be a lot more passing again. I think, like you said, I think we know that we can run the ball. We know we can run the ball against Southern Miss. So I really feel like it's going to be both quarterbacks go out there and show me what you got, and a lot like Florida Atlantic was. We ended up having more passing yardage against Florida Atlantic more than we had rushing yardage, but the rushing yards were there if we needed them. We didn't even play Derrick Henry hardly at all in that game, and we just didn't need to. It's one of those things like you said, those guys are already ahead of the passing right now. I really believe that Kiffin and Saban have to know what they have under center, and as well as they possibly can going into Florida and Ole Miss, because let's face it, those two games are gigantic. Florida is going to be very, very tough game at home, and then you got an off week, and then you got Ole Miss on the road, which is a very losable game. I think both those are losable games for the Tide. So you have I think we're going to see a lot of passing again, and Amari Cooper's going to have a lot of yards again probably. But I would expect the stats to look a lot like they did last week, man, to be honest with you.
When you look at Alabama from a defensive perspective, Scott, as we mentioned earlier in the show, some missed tackles, but that's due to the earliness of the season. When you look at Alabama against Southern Miss, as Nick Saban and Kirby Smart continue to work on improving, seeing these players break down and make tackles in space, seeing the defensive line generate more of that pass rush. Last season, Alabama only had 22 sacks. They have 6 so far this season. And I understand that Landon Collins is the leader of the football team. But when your safety is leading the team in tackles with 15, that's not always a good thing. So for Alabama against Southern Miss, and even moving forward, what do they have to do to really not just bring the pass rush, but just make tackles, just breaking down to make tackles in space? Because SEC opponents, let's just be real, SEC offenses, they pride themselves on getting yards after contact, getting yards in space, making people miss. When you play teams like Texas A&M, like Ole Miss, like LSU, like Mississippi State. They want to get yards after contact. They're not going to go down with the first hit. You got to be able to stand your ground, stick them, wrap them up, securely bring them to the ground. How does Alabama improve on that and going forward? Because you got to keep in mind, this is not Dante Hightower. This is not Rolando McClain. This is not C.J. Mosley. These are not the linebackers of previous seasons. Yes, Trey DePriest is there, but you have Dylan Lee that's there. You have Reggie Ragland, Reuben Foster, Denzel Duval, Rashawn Evans. How do these guys focus in on not just hitting, but breaking down, wrapping up, making those secure tackles to negate yards after contact?
Yeah, I definitely think they're going to get it, I think, man. I mean, you would like your linebacker to be, like a linebacker on your team to be leading the team in tackles. Like you said, Landon Collins is the leader in tackles right now. I don't necessarily think I think people read into that a little too much, probably. I mean, a lot of teams, especially West Virginia, they threw the ball all over us, man. I mean, they're spread wide open. I mean, you're going to get a lot of safety tackles doing that when you play an offense like that. So I think that's a little skewed, probably. But yeah, the linebackers need to play a little better right now. They need to play like Alabama linebackers, which I think they will. I mean, it's only been 2 games, and I think the improvement as a full team from first game to second game was vast, and I think you will see even more improvement from game 2 to game 3. You got to think about it. This is the first time this team has ever played together, and especially on the defense. You have Jaron Reed, a new player. You have DJ Petway, who hasn't played with some of these guys. I mean, DJ Petway never played with Jonathan Allen or Ashawn Robinson. These guys are still filling each other out too. They still have to look next to them and be like, hey, I know what this guy's going to do, where he's going to be. It just takes games, and even though these are glorified scrimmages pretty much, those are still huge experience tools when you play next to your teammate in a game like Florida Atlantic and Southern Miss. So I believe that you'll see even more improvement in this game, and then you will know a whole lot after the Florida, man. We'll know if this team is for real or not after Florida. I mean, and as far as the linebackers, like you were saying, go, I think they just need to just keep playing how they've been playing right now, just wrap up a little bit better, and just keep and trust in Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, because I mean they've gotten so many linebackers to the NFL and so many All-Americans at that position, and we have the talent there, and these guys just have to play up to their ability.
Playing up to their ability is very much so key in being successful at the University of Alabama. But we're going to take one last break here on the S&S show. But when we get back, prediction time. Scott Hodnett goes one-on-one with me once again on the top 20 predictions of the week. You're listening to the S&S show, brought to you by Touchdown Alabama Magazine, your leader in the Alabama football coverage. Welcome back into the S&S show. After recapping so much from week 2 of college football and previewing Alabama versus Southern Miss, it's now time for one of the staples of this show. It's prediction time. And who better to start this atmosphere than Scott Hodnett? The guy has a good record so far in his predictions. I'm not going to say what it is. He can tell you himself. But, Scott, your top 20 games, you lay them out every week. Let's go through them.
All right. Yeah, man. I mean, I think we're all doing pretty good in the picks so far after a couple of weeks. Yeah, the SEC's been, like you said, kind of the desert with kind of gimme picks. But, I mean, that will definitely change starting next weekend. But, yeah, this week's...
As long as everybody's over 500, Scott, I'm fine.
Okay, well then you'll be fine. Most people stay over 500 throughout the year. I mean, a lot of games that heavy favored, you just pick the favorite and you're going to go over 500 more than likely, But yeah, man, this week's another soft week in the SEC. you have I believe you only have three, or you actually have two games that have SEC playing SEC this week, which is Florida and Kentucky and Georgia, South Carolina. Other than that, you have the rest of the teams playing a lot of lesser competitions, but you have a couple of them playing pretty decent competition too. So it's a little bit different than it was last week. Um, let's go ahead and start us off with Alabama Southern Miss. Alabama's a 48-point favorite. I look for them to just about cover that. I have them Alabama 50, Southern Miss 3. I think it's going to be just pretty much like it was last week against Florida Atlantic, and it could have been worse than 41-0 in that game. We knew that. We were pretty much doing whatever we wanted to do, and I think it's going to look a lot like that because Southern Miss is a pretty bad team. They've had one win the last this is the third season right now. They're only working on one win. That's to my school I go to, UAB, so which looks really good this year, by the way, too, but that's another thing. So I like Alabama 50, Southern Miss 3, and the Auburn Tigers are off this week. But they got a big one next Thursday in Manhattan against Kansas State, so we'll talk about that one next week to getting ready for that game. But yes, for the game of the week in the SEC, I have Georgia and South Carolina. We pointed it out a little bit earlier, and I think it's going to be a really close game. I still like Georgia to take it on the road against South Carolina, but look for Georgia to do what Georgia does a lot. And let me tell you something, though. If Georgia goes in here and they wipe the floor with South Carolina, I think Georgia is a legitimate national championship contender already because they only have to play in the East. And, yeah, they play Auburn, which it's at home against them, and they should have beat Auburn last year. So I think Georgia, if they go in and beat South Carolina by 30 points or something, then they could make some straight-up noise this year, I think, in college football. But I like Georgia 28, South Carolina 24 in this game. I think it's going to be a close game, man, and it's going to be a hard-hitting close game. I think Georgia just squeaks it out. We got Oklahoma, Tennessee. That's an interesting game, I think, too. Tennessee's been playing really good ball the first couple games. They look like the Tennessee of old, sort of. They're running, like, they're just hitting the ball, like going towards the ball in defense. Their defense hasn't looked like that in a long time. So, and Oklahoma, we all know Oklahoma. We saw them last year. They played us tough. They beat us. And Oklahoma was really good to start the season off, too. They're a very, very talented team out of the Big 12. I like Oklahoma to win this game. They're favored by 20.5. I think Tennessee's going to cover that, man. I like Oklahoma 38, Tennessee 21. They barely cover it, but I think Tennessee's going to play them really tough, and I think it's going to be a game in the first half, and I think Oklahoma's just going to the talent's going to kind of pull away from them in the second half because, I mean, Tennessee's not quite there talent-wise that Oklahoma is right now, but Tennessee's really, really, really close on their way to being back, and Butch Jones is doing a great job with that program right now. You got Florida, Kentucky. Another team that's been playing good ball is Kentucky. They've been playing really, really good the first couple games. Yeah, they haven't played very much. I mean, they played Tennessee Martin, who is a very bad FCS team, but they beat them very, very badly. And then they played Ohio, who's a good MAC team. Ohio's been really good for a few years in the MAC, and Kentucky beat them pretty good.
They're pretty decent.
I think Kentucky's actually pretty good this year. I think they're way better than Vanderbilt, but we'll get to them in a second. But if this game was at Kentucky, I may give them a kind of an upset special here. Florida's favored by 20.5 at home. I think that number may be a little high. I like Kentucky to barely cover that a little bit. I like Florida 38, Kentucky 19. And I think Kentucky plays them pretty tough, but I think Florida's just good. And Florida looks like they're on a mission, man, right now. And I know they only played that one game against a very, very lesser Eastern Michigan, but they looked really, really good. Florida has not looked like that against anybody under Will Muschamp yet. So scoring 65 points, no matter who it's on, is a pretty big deal. So I like Florida to beat Kentucky, but Kentucky's going to be competitive in that one, I think. I think Mark Stoops is doing really, really good with Kentucky right now. Another interesting game is Arkansas and Texas Tech. I went flip back and forth on this one at least 2 or 3 times, and Texas Tech's favored by 2.5. I'm picking Arkansas in the upset in this game. I'm picking Arkansas 35, Texas Tech 31.
You're going Brett Bielema?
I'm going Bielema, man. I'm not a Brett Bielema fan. I mean, I'll let that be known. I'm not a huge fan of Woo Pig Sooie, but I'm going to go ahead and say Arkansas is going to be able to kind of control the ball. keep Texas Tech off the field because Arkansas has a great offensive line, a great rushing attack. I think that's just going to prove a little too much for the Texas Tech defensive front seven probably, and I like Arkansas to squeak one out. But if Texas Tech offense gets rolling,
Scott, you've just made friends with everyone in Arkansas.
well, I think they can do it, man. This
You
year,
just become everybody in Arkansas's closest friend right now.
well, there you go. All right, well, and we'll kind of do these next few kind of fast since they're all kind of gimme games. Missouri Central Florida is a kind of an interesting game. Missouri's favored by 9.5. I like them barely covering that. I like Missouri 17, Missouri 27, Central Florida 17. Central Florida is not as good as they were last year, and Missouri hasn't been playing that great the first couple games either. But I think Missouri will be all right, and I think they win that game by double digits. Mississippi State 41, South Alabama 20. This is an interesting game too, though. Mississippi State on the road at South Alabama, which is I had to check that one on the schedule twice that they were actually going and playing a road game at South Alabama, but they are. They're only favored by 14.5, and Mississippi State's defense has been kind of shredded. Southern Miss didn't do anything on them because Southern Miss is bad, but UAB shredded Mississippi State's defense last week. I watched most of that game, and UAB actually outgained them in yardage. So either UAB is significantly better than they were last year, or that Mississippi State defense got a lot of holes in it. I think they gave up almost 250 yards just on 3 plays alone against UAB. So Mississippi State needs to really get that figured out, and South Alabama is a pretty good football team. So I like Mississippi State to win that game by 21, but just because I think they just outpower them. But it could be a lot closer than that. Mississippi State, Ole Miss plays Louisiana Lafayette. I like Mississippi State big in that game. I like Mississippi State by 31. I like them 45-14. Ole Miss is pretty good. You got LSU over Louisiana Monroe, 40-31, or 40-17. Excuse me, they're favored by 31. 40-17 over Monroe. You have Texas A&M, another tune-up game against Rice, 55-20. I think it's gonna look a lot like it did last year when Rice scored some points on them. And you got Vanderbilt against Massachusetts. One of the only couple of victories I think Vanderbilt gets this year. And they're favored by 17, and I don't know if they cover that even. I got Vandy 28, Massachusetts 13. Derek Mason is in a world of trouble with Vanderbilt right now, and if this game gets any closer than 28-13, then I don't know what to think about Vanderbilt. But right now they're playing by far the worst team in the SEC. They're playing really, really bad right now. But as you go to some other games around the country, this week's not quite as good in out of conference games as last week was. But the game we talked about earlier, UCLA Texas, that's a strange game. UCLA has not been playing very well, but they've won their first 2 games. Texas won their first one, but got embarrassed by BYU last week. And I think Texas bounces back and has a much better game, but I think UCLA wins the game by 11. I like UCLA 31-20. Could be closer, but I think UCLA finally rights the ship a little bit and beats Texas on the road. But watch out, that is a definite trap game for UCLA. If they play like they did against Virginia and Memphis, then Texas could beat them, I think. But you got another interesting game this week is Maryland and West Virginia. West Virginia at Maryland, and that's a tough game to pick right there. It's a pretty small line, and I like West Virginia maybe because I've seen them up close and personal, watched the whole game when they played Alabama. But I came away impressed with that game against Alabama that West Virginia played, man. And I think West Virginia can do it. I think they can go on the road and beat Maryland. I like West Virginia 21, Maryland 17 in that game. I think they can do it. And a couple more we'll hit on real fast. I like Virginia Tech over East Carolina. I think it's going to be pretty decently close. So I like 21-14. I think it's going to be a pretty low-scoring game, but Virginia Tech wins. So I think USC handles Boston College pretty easily, 35-14. Louisville, Virginia. This will be the last one I'll talk about right here. Louisville at Virginia. This is one of the hardest games to pick of the entire weekend. I've seen a lot of people picking this as an upset special. Louisville on the road against Virginia, a team who is playing a lot better this year. I like Louisville. I like Louisville very close to this game. I like Louisville by a touchdown. I like them 28-21 to barely get past Virginia and it's a pretty stout test on the road because Virginia's playing playing pretty good ball right now, even though the record doesn't show it.
Great pick, Scott. The fans can always view mine on the story we release each week, touching Alabama writers making the picks. Scott always releases a story with the writers of Touchdown Alabama making our picks each Thursday, so the viewers can always catch my decisions being made via that story. But one of the games I want to talk about was that Tennessee-Oklahoma game. That's going to be a matchup that, if Bob Stoops does not back his word up about how better the bottom tier of the Big 12 is against the bottom tier of the SEC, he may get ran out of town, because he's been on talks to say a lot about how the bottom tier of the SEC isn't as good as the Big 12. Tennessee, this is a statement game for them. It's a statement game for Cam Sutton as a defensive back, for A.J. Johnson at linebacker, and also a confidence game for Justin Worley at quarterback. He's been playing well so far. Can he continue to move the football? For Oklahoma, not only defensively, offensively, this is a game for Trevor Knight. He has to understand, SEC defenses a lot faster than Big 12 defenses. You're playing against an SEC defense that is going to hit you, that is going to force you to make mistakes with the football. Quarterback coach, offensive coordinator Josh Heupel has got to call up a masterful game plan for Trevor Knight in this contest. When you look at South Carolina and Georgia this week, this is a must-win game for Spurrier and company. It's a must-win. You're playing Georgia, and as you mentioned, Scott, if Georgia gets through this game with flying colors, they're going to be that team to beat in the SEC, and definitely that team to beat going forward, because you have all the pieces healthy on offense. Defensively, Georgia's only going to get better under defensive coordinator Jeremy Pruitt. So this is a must-win game for South Carolina, especially if they want to even be looked at as a formidable opponent in the Southeastern Conference. You talked about Virginia Tech and East Carolina. Beamer Ball, Bud Foster, they've got to play. They've got to play. They've got to come out focused offensively, focused defensively, because if they watch that tape and they watched how much East Carolina gave South Carolina fits, and they know how much the Pirates have given them fits, them being the Virginia Tech Hokies, the Hokies have got to come out, and they got to come out ready to play mistake-free football and balanced football. But as always, Scott, I really enjoy your picks. They really add a nice flavor and a nice addition into the show. But this Saturday, Alabama, Southern Miss, Bryant-Denny Stadium, 5 o'clock p.m. Going to be very exciting, very entertaining football game for the fans, as well as the analysts like you and myself here, Scott. But that has been all today for the S&S Show, brought to you by Touchdown Alabama Magazine, your leader in Alabama football coverage. We do the S&S Show podcast every Wednesday. We do the S&S Show every Wednesday. You can catch us live here via Google Hangouts. We not only break down Alabama, we touch on the SEC, we touch on national games, and deliver our top 20 picks every Wednesday. And though we love for you to catch us live and interact with us, if you can't, podcast is the next best thing. We put out a podcast of this show every Thursday on touchdownalabama.net. You can view the podcast on Facebook. You can view the podcast on Twitter. It doesn't matter if you're ironing clothes, washing dishes, at work, getting a sandwich at the game. You can always catch the S&S Show podcast brought live to you. You can also catch it on Bama Sports Radio. Alabama Sports Radio, your insight on getting all the up-to-date commentary information, whether it's football, baseball, softball, gymnastics. Take Bama Sports Radio with you everywhere. They have the updates and up-to-date commentary on our Alabama sports. Scott Hodnett has the app. I'm working on getting it. But Alabama Sports Radio, your home for everything Alabama needs. As I mentioned, this is all for today here on the S&S Show, brought to you by Touchdown Alabama Magazine, your leader in Alabama football coverage. Enjoy the game this Saturday between Alabama and Southern Miss. For Scott Hodnett, I'll be yours truly, Stephen M. Smith. Until next time, so long, everybody.